That's really cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to record here, and let's see if it's supposed to swivel over here. See if it will. There we go. It's alive. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real treat, and it looks like a great crowd. So today we're going to talk a lot about why and purpose. And as I was preparing for the talk today, I was reminded of a wonderful novel by Charles Dickens, and we probably have all heard the phrase, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Any English majors who know what how the rest of that goes? We'd have to have a prize for that. Well, the way it goes, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epic of belief. And it was also the epic of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, and we had nothing before us. In large part, it was much like the period we're living in today. So this was written by Charles Dickens in 1859, and it was written about London and Paris before and during the French Revolution, which was a time of immense change. And I think in many respects, we're in the midst of a real tidal wave of change in the way we do business, in the way organizations function, in the way the people who are coming to work with us and their expectations of us as companies and leaders. And the question is how prepared we will be. And so I think there are a couple different pathways to go. And we can look back, and we can look at how we've done things, or we can look forward. And I think that I'm going to share with you today some examples of companies that I think are looking forward. There's an old saying that the future is here, it's just spotty. And so the future is already showing up in the way some new companies are working and functioning, and the way HR professionals are working and functioning, and the way they're looking at profits, and the way they're looking at their relationship with consumers and the wider world. So I want to talk about that today and create a context. So let's talk for a moment about what I would say deep purpose. And that's what we're going to be focused on today, is that companies who have a deeper purpose tend to function much better and actually are more profitable and actually engage their employees more. And so the question is, how can we create businesses and organizations that can discover what that deeper purpose is? And how can we also elicit that from our employees? How can we help them discover their deeper purpose and see how that can integrate with the company? And we'll talk about it, because I think this is a little different model than maybe what you're used to. So to create some context, I thought I would tell you a story. And I love that effect. Isn't that cool? So in 1958, there was a temple in Thailand, and it had a large stone Buddha. And they decided they were going to put a highway in, and they needed to move the temple maybe 50 yards to accommodate that. And so they brought cranes in to move this gigantic stone Buddha. And they put straps around it, and as they were lifting it up, someone saw that a crack was forming, and they said, "Whoa, stop, put it down. We need to rethink this." And so they put a large tarp over it. It was starting to rain to protect it. And they said, we need to go back to the drawing board to figure out how we're going to move this gigantic sculpture. And that night, one of the monks came out with a flashlight to check on the Buddha to be sure it was dry. And he was flashing his light. And suddenly he saw the glimmer of something reflecting back at him. That was strange. It was a stone Buddha. And he got closer, and he saw in one of the cracks there was something that looked like it was metallic. And he suddenly realized maybe this is not a stone Buddha. And he got a small hammer, and he cracked away what was the stone. It was actually mud. And underneath there was metal. And that morning, all the monks, they came with their hammers, and they broke out, and there was actually a golden Buddha underneath the stone. How did that happen? Well, it turns out about 400 years previously, an army from Burma was coming through Thailand. And they were basically scouring the countryside. Anything that was of any value they were taking. And the monks got word that they were coming. And this was their most valuable possession, was this Buddha. And they knew that if they saw it, they would probably take it and melt it down. And so they covered it with mud. But most of those monks were carried off and either killed or jailed, or they never returned, and there were a few monks left. And as generations went by, people had forgotten the story of what happened. And it was only in 1958 when they were trying to lift this large sculpture did they discover there was something precious underneath. And I think that our deep purpose is somewhat like that, is that companies, I think, can have a deeper purpose. It's often hidden in a lot of stuff. It's hidden in the products and the services and all the procedures and policies. And we forget about it. And I think the people coming to work with you, especially millennials today, they are looking for a deeper purpose. And the question is, how do we energize and engage that? And I want to that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about some changes. The world's changing. And first of all, consumers are changing in big ways. People today are wanting to do business with companies that not only make money, but do well for the community and for the wider world. And they're marching and they're voting with their dollars, and all of you are some of those people. And it's changing the way consumer behavior has been radically changing very quickly over the last 15 years. It has radically shifted. And some companies are beginning to radically shift in response to that. But let's talk about some numbers. 47% of global consumers buy brands that support a good cause. 47%. So a company that's involved with a cause is going to attract more buyers than companies that aren't. 72% of consumers would recommend a brand that supports a cause. So if you're buying something that supports a cause, you're going to tell your friends about it. Okay? And then 73% would switch to products with a purpose, of a company that has a wider purpose. So consumers are changing. If we were talking 15, 20 years ago, you would have probably, people would say, what are you talking about? But today, it's different. It has changed that quickly and that radically. So one of the things that was very fast, that animation, that wasn't supposed to go like that. But so in 1989, that's when the World Wide Web was created. Okay, it seems just like yesterday, at least to me it does. I don't know for all of you gray-haired folks, I just feel that way. It's just yesterday. I was involved in that early wave of the computer business. I ran a marketing and advertising company and I got a company that I worked with that made the first circuit boards that went into the IBM PC that had just come out. And when 5 megabyte hard drives came out, that was really exciting stuff. It was a different time. So in '89, if you were really wealthy, you could have access to all kinds of resources. Well, today, with the World Wide Web, you and I can have access to more information and knowledge than a billionaire did 30 years ago. And that's every person out here. People have access to, we don't even realize the impact that that's had. 1995. In 1995, half the people in the world had never made a phone call. Had never made a phone call. And today, 7 billion people own these little devices in the world. You can go to the backwoods of Africa and you will find people using cell phones. They forgot it. They just said, let's not worry about the infrastructure. We'll put cell towers in everywhere. So they bypassed us. They didn't worry about the expense of that. So the cell phone is becoming ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Okay? Now, employees are changing too, and I don't need to tell you folks this because you live with it every day. But there's some really interesting numbers, and as you know, people who are coming, who are this younger generation, they're wanting more. They're wanting more than just work. And the really frightening figures are, Gallup says 55% of them are unengaged with their work. And if you think of this as someone who runs a company, if over half your people are coming and they're not engaged, what does that do to productivity? What does that do to the prospects for your business or your organization? The other thing is that they don't want a paycheck, they're wanting purpose. And they're not working so much for a job, they're looking for something that's a fulfilling life. That's a change also. I think younger generations, other generations were not as focused in that way. So it's a different world. They're also wanting the big picture. They're wanting the big picture. It's not enough for them to say, here's your job in this little cubbyhole. They want to know how that fits in with everything else that's going on with the business. And how does the business fit in with everything that's going on in the wider world? And is it a company that they can feel proud to be a part of? 71% of millennials strongly agree that if the company has a strong purpose, they're going to stick around. And you probably know that many of them are sort of they're at risk for flight. You hire them, and the next thing you know, they announce they're leaving, and you've invested a huge amount into these young people, and they're going off to the next job because it didn't fulfill them in some profound way. 1 in 3 report that their company gives them a sense of purpose, and that they feel good about that. I mean, the sad news about that is 2/3 don't. That's a big number. And finally, only 1 in 4 can report that someone in their company in the last week talked about the purpose of the business and what we're doing in the wider world. And you've probably read all the data and statistics about managers being more engaged and involved with younger people. They want to know what they're doing and how it fits in with something bigger than they are. Now, companies are also changing. 30 years ago, it was all about providing a return to the shareholder. That was almost like it was like a truth that could never even be challenged. That's what businesses are for, is to return equity to the shareholder. And the shareholder was the person who invested money. It had nothing to do with the employees, it had nothing to do with the community, it had nothing to do with the environment. And as a result, we had companies that were doing all kinds of things that weren't necessarily good for our world. That's also changing today. Companies are interested in people, the planet, as well as profits. And I'll show you some data here in a moment, is that companies that do this are actually more profitable. So there's an assumption that if we do these other things, business won't be good. It'll be kind of a zero-sum game. We'll be giving away something, but in fact, it makes sense for good business. So this is one of the ways I think that businesses and organizations can optimize their possibilities and their potential, is by looking at creating a deeper, bigger purpose for what they're doing. Here's an interesting statistic, and I think it's really interesting. I was talking to Leslie Spies. Leslie, Storywork is a sister company to Dewey's. And so the founder of Dewey's, or the owner of Dewey's, Scott Livengood, who used to be the head of Krispy Kreme here, he and I are partnering in this whole endeavor with Storywork. But 70% of new businesses are being started by women in the world. That's a tidal shift, and that's a whole change in worldview and values. All of you who are sitting here, you have a very different perspective about relationships than men do. And the world is going to change in businesses because women are running them, which I think is a good thing. So there's an evolving movement called conscious capitalism. Anybody heard of that term before? Yeah, a few of you. So there's a kind of a growing. They even have an organization. If you have an idea, you can create an organization. And Leslie and I were at one of the meetings about a year ago. There was probably about 1,000 people there at the meeting. Companies all over the world who are beginning to ask the question, how can we be more conscious of how we use our resources? So you can, right here, there's a Whole Foods here. Whole Foods is one of the first companies that began looking at not just return on investment, but looking at their employees as stakeholders, looking at the environment as stakeholders, looking at the people they were purchasing their foods from as stakeholders, that they would make a difference. Even companies like Target, they target their local communities to give back, and they get very engaged. All of us know Ben & Jerry's. I've been privileged to get to know a guy named Terry Mullner, who's on the board of PCI Media, this organization I'm on the board of. Terry's on the board of Ben & Jerry's, so I've got a little inside scoop on what goes on with Ben & Jerry's. And Ben & Jerry's was a company that Ben & Jerry were guys that had a huge investment in issues: racial justice, climate justice, fair trade, peace building. And they were right up front about, this is what we're about as an organization. And then they were bought by Unilever. And the great fear was that all that was going to go away. And they were able to negotiate a unique arrangement with Unilever, like they're left alone. They have their own board, they're allowed to do their thing. And what's interesting is that Unilever is now beginning to transform itself using Ben & Jerry's as a model. They're beginning to see that this makes sense as a business model. So all of you can look at all the brands here with Unilever, tons of brands, and they're beginning to think differently about what it means to do business. And then you have companies that are actually Toms. Anybody ever bought a Tom shoes? Yeah, it's got somebody back, a couple people. You know, with every product you purchase, Toms will help a person in need. Here's a company that has a wider purpose, and they're doing well. They're doing well by having wider purpose. So let's talk about some of the hard numbers. People say, yeah, but you know, these companies are probably not doing so well, and how is that possible that they're doing this? The S&P over the last 10 years went up about 120%. And if any of you read the book Good to Great, you know, which was, you know, profiling companies that do really great things, have core values, have all the things that we would admire, they've gone up about 325%. They've outperformed the S&P. Interestingly, companies with a wider purpose have gone up about 1,000% in terms of their revenue. They're performing well. So there's something powerful in this business model that I think is really crucial. And you as HR professionals, I think, need to know that as you lead your companies toward the future. So one of the things they found is that companies that are functioning well, they have a higher purpose. They call it stakeholder integration. They're looking at everything as a stakeholder, not just the investors. They're looking at their employees as a stakeholder. They're looking at the people who supply their products as stakeholders. They're looking at the environment itself as a stakeholder. And when you start doing that, it starts changing the equation of how you do business. Their leadership is more conscious and focused, and they're creating a more conscious culture. So one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about story, and so I think that the story that you create for your business either limits or it opens up and expands your potential and your possibilities. And the story that you create will have huge, huge consequences. And the bigger the story, the more potential you have as a company. The more your story encompasses all the other stakeholders, the greater your potential the potential you have. So one of the things that we've been looking at is we think there are 3 pillars to really a successful business. And most companies look at maybe 1 or 2, but there's a third one that's important. You have to have a sound business proposition. You got to have good products. You have to have good services, whether you're in government or whether you're in the private sector. What you're offering your constituencies has to be really high quality. People expect that today. Nobody wants to buy something that's a poor quality product. So companies won't make it if they have that. Here's the other piece though, the power of your company's business purpose, its value to the world in a bigger sense. That's also a pillar that hasn't normally been considered. And finally, something that all of you know so well, it has to do with the engagement and the strength and commitment of your people. So we think that this third one, the power of your company's business purpose, this may be the most important pillar as we move into the 21st century. So, you know, the model I think that has been around up until recently has been evolving. First, you know, years ago it was about inclusion. And it was really, I think that from an HR perspective, it was like human resources. People were not seen as people, they were just resources to be moved around. And hopefully most of us have moved beyond that model and realized that's not a good model. And we've moved to what we call probably alignment. How do we align our staff with the mission and purpose and vision of the company? We think there's actually a third level. We call it integration. And what we mean by that is that when a company has its highest purpose and sees its greatest possibilities, and the people coming to work have also identified what their highest purpose is, and see how that can contribute to this bigger purpose, something powerful happens. There's a synergy. And I want to share with you a little bit about what that looks like with Dewey's, because it's an interesting story. So one of the things that we started looking at, we asked the question, what is our master story? What is the big story that we can create that can actually expand our possibilities to their furthest limits? And we think it has to do with our deeply held beliefs. It's a driving force and a source of inspiration for everybody. So that's where we began. And the company's been on this journey for a few years. And Scott sort of has been driving that, and we've taken a step back, and we're sort of in midstream. So I'm kind of going to give you a report of a midstream report. We're not there yet. There's a lot of things that we're still working on and trying to get there, but Dewey's is actually doing some exceptional things that I think make it a wonderful company. So we started out using a process called story storming, and it's based on some work I did in former work with a division of Disney when I was there. And we understood the power of story. And so what we've done is we've engaged our leadership team recently in a whole process, not only of harvesting stories that actually reflect the best of who we are as a company, but imagining stories into the future of what we could become. And we're using that material to actually drive and help us think about what should our master story be and how should we get there. So I'll share once again, this is Leslie, we were working yesterday on this with the leadership team. It's a work in progress. This is not the final form. We're still going back and forth. But here's our master story. We are creators of pure possibility and celebration every day. Now, we're a bakery. You don't see anything about baking cookies there or baking sugar cake. It has nothing to do with that. But I want to talk, we'll see in a moment how this is actually playing out, because if this is our master story, you'll suddenly see it has huge consequences, not only for our company and what we do, but it has to do with how we treat our people, and it also has to do with our involvement in the community. So this is how we do it. We're passionate about continually elevating our execution. We consistently challenge ourselves to pursue the one thing that raises the trajectory of our possible. This applies in equal measure to every aspect of our company, our brands, and even our partners' brands. So we do a lot of private label for lots of companies, Trader Joe's and Walmart and Kroger and Publix. And so you may be buying our cookies and not even knowing it. But their brands are as important to us as our brand. And finally, we aspire to be products and a brand that is beloved and admired. So let's talk about how that's showing up in the world. Now, all of you probably have eaten one of these if you've gone into Dewey's. If I was just I live in Atlanta, and I go back and forth between Atlanta and Winston, and I was just selling a bicycle, and this guy is buying the bicycle, and somehow Winston-Salem comes up, and he says, well, what do you do? And I mentioned that I have some association with Dewey. Oh, guy loves Dewey's. He would probably drive 150 miles to get sugar cake. So probably all of you are very familiar with the retail store over here at Thruway, and we have another one in Reynolda area. But the company makes a lot of other things besides sugar cake, from regular cakes to cupcakes, and you may be familiar with this product, which is the Moravian Ginger Snap, which is the thinnest cookie in the world. Now, when the company was bought about 10 years ago, this product represented, it was less than $1 million in sales a year. It was kind of a seasonal thing. You could mostly buy it from Williams-Sonoma. The company's evolved, though, and now we have 2 plants here in Winston-Salem that people aren't aware of, making cookies for all these other providers, plus our own brands. And now we've just introducing a whole new line of crackers and cookies that are all Southern inspired. They're going to be hitting the stores, and we just found out that 2 large chains have already picked them up. So it's exciting. So this has all the product development has been informed by that wider possible story. But we're doing some other interesting, cool things. We have a community garden at our plant over on Kimwell Drive. And I was just in the office the other day with Scott, and one of the employees came in with a big bowl of strawberries she had just picked in the garden. And the garden is for our employees. So we're helping them produce food that they can have and to enhance their life and style. And so there you see Michelle and Scott are out there, they're helping plant. And it's growing and it's thriving. Just the other day over at the Thruway store, a truck backed into a telephone pole and knocked out electricity for all the Thruway shopping plaza. It was 5 in the morning, and we had people coming in around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning to pick up cakes. So here's an employee who's at 5 in the morning with a flashlight going to decorate a cake. So we've got people who are, people could say, well, I can't work here, and we'll have to wait till the lights come. They improvise. They figured it out, and they met the deadlines and expectations of our clients. The other thing that we're doing some remarkable things. We have a 401k plan for everyone in the company. Not just for the top people, that is everyone, even the hourly employees. And we're encouraging them to begin saving for the future. So in a world where healthcare is going away, we're providing health insurance for people throughout the company. So we're doing some remarkable things for the staff. But in the community, we're doing some things, and maybe you've gone to one of these holiday stores. Over the last 5 years, we've helped organizations raise $1 million. From the local school band to whatever organization wants, whatever their cause is, if they want to man the store, they get, I think, about 1/3 of the sales. And so we gave $1 million away over the last 5 years to organizations throughout the Winston-Salem area. Any of you go to the Living Your Best Life talk last year? No? No. So hospice came to us and said, would you support our local golf tournament? And that's kind of the traditional thing to do. And he said, well, we're not really interested in that, but we'd be real interested in doing something bigger. Let's create a program about living your best life, and let's make it an annual speaker series. And so we had Sean Acor here last year, who wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage, and helped hospice raise over $250,000. And we underwrote Sean coming here. The other thing is we've initiated a program here with Novant Health called Living Stories. And we went to them about 4 years ago, and actually they came to us and said, we have a healing arts program. Could you help us do something with that? And they said, well, we're really interested in storytelling. And they said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, let's do something around reminiscence. And we actually commissioned research. We found that when patients have a chance to tell their story and focus on their positive memories and memories of times when they face challenges, that actually their anxiety goes down and their coping skills go up. They also seem to have a better experience overall in the hospital. And so we've been developing training. That research was concluded in the fall, and we just had our first cohort of volunteers go through about a month ago, and we've got another 15 coming through, and we're going to expand it throughout Novant Health. So this all came out of the mission of Dewey's. So let's talk now more about our friend here, and I want to bring it down to the individual level, and talked about the notion of a calling. What does it mean if every employee who came into your organization knew very clearly what they were called to do in their life and knew how that intersected with the bigger part of your business? So there are a couple wonderful quotes I like. This is from Mark Twain. The two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. And then from our friend Aristotle, where your talents and the needs of the world cross, there lies your vocation. So the question is, how can we help employees discover where that intersection is? How can we help them do that? So you have on your table a little deck of cards called Calling Clues, and we've been experimenting and developing a whole approach to this. I want to invite you to open them, and I'm going to give you a chance. We'll have some fun with them. There's one rogue card in there. It turned out we had missed a card, and I slipped one in. I also threw my business card. My business card is not your calling. So go ahead and open them. And here's what we're going to take about 5 minutes to do this, and then we'll see what we can learn. And so what I want you to do is go through the cards and sort them right in front of you. And I want you to put the cards to the one side that you go, that's not me. I'm not called to do that. And then on the other side, make a pile of cards that you go, oh yeah, that's kind of like me. So take a couple minutes to make the two stacks, and then I'll give you the second set of directions. Everybody clear on what to do? Anybody need help opening the packaging? That's cellophane. So make it quick, just really quick. It's either, yep, that feels like me, that could be my calling. Nope, that's absolutely not my calling. And so we'll eliminate, hopefully, a large number of them. There's some blanks in there, so don't worry about those. So once you have your deck that's kind of like you, put the other cards that are not like you off to the side. You can stick them back in the box. And I'd like you to go through the cards that are kind of like you, and I want you to select 5. Narrow it down to 5 cards. So that may feel challenging, so you're going to have to get very discerning. So you might want to do a first sort and get it down to maybe even 10, and then choose 5 if you've got a large pile. The 5 that most approximate what you think is your calling in life. And once you have your 5, just raise your hand so I can see where we are in the room. Okay. So if you've got your 5, I now want you to select 1 out of the 5. Now I'm going to give you permission to, if you want to amalgamate a couple of them, and you could take one of your blank cards and sort of create your own version of what you think your calling is. But I'd like you to come down to one thing. So you might write something if you had creating possibilities and seeing new things. You might want to amalgamate those into one and write it for yourself. These are just clues. These are not what they are. But I want you to come down to 1. If you have your 1, raise your hand. Let's just see. We've got a lot of. Okay, we're going to give you just about one more minute to identify the 1, or if you can, if the worst possible, we'll let you have 2. I'm feeling kind today. Leslie was telling me that HR professionals are not kind people, but I didn't believe her. So here's what I want you to do. With a partner, just turn to someone next to you, and here's the question. Whatever your calling is, how can you best use your calling to help your company succeed? How can you best use the thing that you are called most to do to help your organization or your company? So just take a minute each with each partner and just to answer that question. With one partner. Okay, about 30 more seconds. Okay, let me get you back if I could. Let me get you back. Let me get you back, please. I get your attention. It's like herding cats. Okay. I'd like to hear from you real quick. We've just got a couple minutes. So, anybody willing to share what they discovered in the process, their calling, and how it intersects, perhaps it helped them intersect better with helping you to be successful with your business? Who's brave? Yeah. Yeah, you. Yeah. No, the guy behind you. No. Yeah, talking to you.
Well, I work for Goodwill, and our role is to help people find jobs. And so Goodwill does two things. It either teaches people a new skill to be employed, or it helps them work with the skills they have to do a better job of the job search. And that's my role, is to teach and to help people get to where they want to go. Mm-hmm. It dovetails real nice with.
So what was your calling?
To teach.
To teach. Okay. So it's a perfect fit. You're in a great position.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense that you ended up where you are. Good. Who else had a good one? Anybody else? One more. Yeah, thank you.
This is the brave table.
It is a brave table. All the courage is residing at this table.
So mine was to coach, and being in corporate HR, I feel like that's my calling, is to coach the management, coach our teams, our administrative staff, to make sure that they're doing the right things day to day, give them the information that they need to be, one, successful in their day-to-day duties, but also to help the company be successful and keep me out of the EEOC office.
Thanks for sharing. Imagine with me if every employee who comes to work at your organization had a clear sense of what they're called to do in this world. And that they were able to bring the best of that into the work they're doing, and that you were able to provide a work environment that also elicited that. That's a powerful integrated combination of things to happen that actually can propel your organizations in ways that probably you don't even know yet. You're not even sure how that could work. So any quick questions before we kind of wrap up? Oh, good. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. I don't know. Anybody like to close the meeting?
We do have a few things left to wrap up with. I know that Denise is back there with her basket, collecting for Sherm Foundation to buy raffle tickets. What's the gift today?
Gift today is a Visa gift card, and I don't know the exact amount.
It's $1 million.
Anywhere from 20 to 100. Actually, Alan Hayes is Ryan Weather is sponsoring our monthly raffle, so I don't have to go out and raffle something every month.
Okay.
So he has willingly agreed to donate gift basket gift cards, and this one just happens to be a gift card, and he didn't tell me how much. Somebody said, well, go online and find out. We have to register a card to go on the top, which I could, but I don't want to register a gift card.
Well, you're making a donation to Sherm Foundation, so it doesn't matter what you're winning, right? Yeah. So,
Anybody?
raise your hand if you need that.
Did I miss anybody?
Here's one over here.
Oh, okay.
And we had some drawings. Hillchester and Woody, I think, has a basket over here. And does Part had a basket, a little fish bowl over here? Anybody didn't get their card in that one? Around here? Look, walking in. That was getting used to it. Like, hey.